Turkey is pressing ahead with its operation in northern Syria against Syrian Kurdish forces. Now, the Kurds have lost the United States as their ally, so they've turned to Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, who is moving his troops north towards the Turkish border. Now, we have some of the latest footage here taken from Syria, taken from Turkey, looking across into Syria, where Turkish shelling of Ras al-Ain continued this morning. At least 160,000 civilians are believed to have fled the fighting in the border area, and they have headed deeper into Syria. But opposition to Turkey's assault is growing. U.S. President Donald Trump is imposing economic sanctions to pressure Turkey to stop the offensive and is sending Vice President Mike Pence to Ankara to try and broker a ceasefire. This is what Pence had to say about Washington's aims.
The president's objective here is very clear, that the sanctions that were announced today will continue and will worsen unless and until Turkey embraces an immediate ceasefire, stops the violence, and agrees to negotiate a long-term settlement of the issues along the border between Turkey and Syria.
Let's go right to DW correspondent Julia Hahn. She is in Akçakale on the Turkish side of the border for us. Hi, Julia. Good to see you. The U.S. is now imposing sanctions. The Vice President, Mike Pence, is now on his way to the region. What can U.S. pressure actually do here?
Well, there are no signs yet that President Erdogan will back down and end this military operation despite the international criticism, despite the U.S. sanctions, even though these sanctions might potentially hurt an already weak Turkish economy, an economy that hasn't yet recovered from last year's severe currency crisis. Now, Trump raised steel tariffs again back up to 50%. That's something he did last year already when he was pushing for the release of an American pastor from a Turkish jail. He also issued sanctions on 3 Turkish ministers, and he suspended a trade deal worth $100 billion US dollars. Now, this did not have an immediate drastic effect on the Turkish currency here, but it might scare off more foreign investors.
Julia, you are there on the Turkish side of the border. Tell us what's been happening behind you on the Syrian side of the border.
Well, just earlier today, we heard fresh shelling and pounding very loudly. So the Turkish artillery is right behind me, and they're hitting targets there in northeast Syria. I'm about 5 kilometers away from the border. On the other side, you have the Syrian town of Tal Abyad. It has been captured by the Turkish military, but apparently there is still fighting going on in the surroundings. That's one of the main targets. The other main target is the city of Ras Al Ain. Still, there are heavy clashes going on there, and we have a new front line there in northeast Syria after the Kurdish-led forces have officially turned to the Syrian regime for help. And Bashar al-Assad has been sending units of troops to parts of northeastern Syria for the first time in years, because in 2012 the Kurds there shrugged off Damascus's rule, and the Syrian government forces were actually withdrawing. Now they're back. They're facing the Turkish army along a new front line, and this is essentially a victory for Bashar al-Assad and maybe more importantly for his backer, Russia, because now they have a foothold in an area that was beyond their control for many years.
Julia, as all of the fighting has been going on, you've had the chance to talk to some people there. What have they been telling you? Well, public support for this military offensive is broad across Turkish societies, across the Turkish society. Not only President Erdogan's AKP is supporting this offensive, but also other parties. The only exception is the pro-Kurdish opposition party, HDP. The media reporting is also very much pro-offensive, very nationalist. The media are framing it as a security operation aimed at combating a terrorism threat across the border. We've been talking to people in the city of Urfa, near where I am. Let's listen to what they had to tell us.
We support this operation. We stand with our soldiers. I hope Turkey will be as successful as it was in the previous operation. It will liberate these places and enable people to breathe freely.
Our lives will be easier, God willing. The border area has always been dangerous because our country was invaded by the PKK.
This operation is a great thing. It's wonderful. Otherwise, terrorists will threaten us and drag our country into a war.
We stand behind our president and our soldiers. I hope God will never take them from us.
Now, those who feel differently don't dare to voice criticism. The Turkish government has clamped down on critical voices. It has detained dozens of people for critical social media posts in the past days. So right where we are here is very difficult to talk to people and understand their concerns because, as I said, people are scared to voice criticisms or even the slightest concern about this military operation.
DW's Yulia Han reporting for us on the Turkish-Syrian border. Thank you, Yulia.